On the coldest night of the year, 2 half-frozen wolves clawed at Anna's door, begging for shelter from the storm, and she was the only human alive foolish enough to even consider letting them in. The blizzard didn't just fall over the mountains, it assaulted them. Snow hammered the cabin walls in hard, relentless bursts, testing every seam her grandfather had ever sealed by hand. Wind screamed along the eaves, flattening the dark pines and piling drifts higher against the logs. Inside, the fire in the stone hearth roared like it was the last warm thing left in the world. Anna nudged another log into the flames and watched sparks jump up the chimney. Heat flushed her cheeks, but the cold still clung stubbornly to her fingers. The forecast, back when her phone had bars, had promised a quiet front and gentle flurries. Instead, the valley had vanished into white, and every hour the world seemed to shrink until all that remained was this cabin, this fire, and the steady thud of her own heartbeat. It wasn't the first promise this year that had crumbled under pressure. She wrapped both hands around her mug, breathing in steam and pine needle tea. The red wool of her hood pooled around her shoulders, still dusted with snow from the last frantic trip to the woodpile. Flakes melted into her loose hair and darkened the sleeves of the cloak her grandfather always said made her look like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale. Safe trouble, he would grin. Up here, nothing and no one can touch you. Up here was all she had left. No trains, no crowds, no bored officers with tired pens and tired eyes. People in the city could call this a breakdown if they wanted. They could whisper about the rising star who'd vanished into the mountains. Anna thought of it as a ceasefire, a fragile truce between her and a world that had proved, too clearly, it wouldn't protect her when it counted. Before we begin, tap subscribe so you never miss the next story. A sound slid through the howl of the storm. She went still, mug halfway to her lips. Not the wind. Not the familiar creak of the roof timbers, or the soft thud of snow sloughing off the eaves. Something sharper. Closer. Her mind scrambled for reasonable explanations. A loose shutter. A branch shaken against the wall. The mountains were good at warping sound. Her grandfather had warned her about that on winter hunts. The way ice and distance twisted a noise until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. Weeks of solitude did the rest. They turned random creaks into footsteps. Turned gusts into whispers. A brain used to constant city noise did not like silence, it filled it with ghosts. She forced a breath out and set the mug down. Tea rippled, a tiny dark wave against ceramic. The storm roared. The fire popped. Nothing else. See? She told herself. Just the cabin settling. Just nerves. Scratch. This time the sound crawled along the bottom of the door, rough and deliberate. Another scratch followed. Then another. Steady. Rhythmic. Wrong. Anna's heart jolted hard enough to make her vision pulse. The hair on her arms lifted beneath the wool of her sweater. The wind didn't do that. Loose boards didn't. This was the sound of something trying to get in. Then came the low, ragged whine. It cut through the storm like a blade, too clear, too full of pain to be anything but alive. Not metal. Not the moan of air through a bad seal. An animal, and not a small one. She pushed up from the armchair, knees bumping the coffee table. Her gaze flew, by habit, to the stone mantel. Her grandfather's rifle rested there, dark wood polished with years of careful hands. She didn't want it. She took it anyway. The gun felt heavier than it ever had as she checked the safety with fingers that didn't quite feel like her own. The cabin had never seemed small until now, each plank beneath her boots announcing every step as she moved toward the door. Shadows jumped and shrank as the fire shifted, turning familiar furniture into crouched shapes. Probably just a fox, she whispered, alive for the benefit of the empty room. Or a raccoon. Something small. Foxes didn't whine like that. She knew it. Her whole body knew it. At the narrow window beside the door, frost had grown into a tangle of white ferns, blurring the world beyond. Anna leaned close and peered through the small patch of clear glass her breath had left earlier. Her heart stopped, then slammed back into motion. 2 wolves pressed into the snow against her door. Ice crusted their fur, clinging to ears and whiskers. The smaller wolf lay half on its side, flank heaving. Blood stained the drift beneath one leg, dark and awful against the pristine white. A brutal metal trap bit into its ankle, rusted teeth sunk deep into swollen flesh. The other wolf loomed over it, massive shoulders bunched, coat of luminous silver that caught every fragment of light from her window. One paw raked at the door, not in mindless panic, but in insistent, almost purposeful strikes. As she stared, the wolf stopped scratching and lifted its head. Amber eyes met hers through the glass. Anna jerked back, breath catching. Every wilderness lecture she'd ever half listened to blasted through her mind. Don't feed predators. Don't approach. Never forget that you are prey. Call the rangers. Stay inside. Bolt the door. The silver wolf's gaze did not fit into any of those bullet points. There was no empty animal hunger in it. No dull, glassy threat. What looked back at her was focused. Aware. Desperate. It turned toward the smaller wolf and nudged its muzzle with a careful tenderness that made her throat tighten. The injured animal barely responded. Its breaths came as faint, uneven puffs that were already thinning in the brutal cold. They're wild, she whispered. They survive winters without you. They'll find shelter. The smaller wolf's chest hitched, and then stilled for one terrible heartbeat. When it finally rose again, the breath was so weak she had to squint to see it. The trap had been there for hours, maybe longer. Fur and skin had frozen to the metal. If infection didn't kill it, the cold would. That much, even an amateur could see. Anna knew what it was to be trapped somewhere no one else wanted to look. To slam her hand against a door while strangers stared very carefully at anything but her. To beg for help and watch eyes slide away. A memory flickered, sharp and poisonous, packed bodies on a train, gloved fingers digging into her arm, voices like knives, and later, a detective's bored pen scratching across a form while she tried to make her shaking hands hold still. No one opened their door for you, something inside her hissed. You lived. So will they. Outside, the silver wolf threw back its head and let out a sound that wasn't quite a normal howl. It was too focused, too full of raw, deliberate anguish. It vibrated through the window glass, through her ribs, through the bruised places inside her she pretended had healed. This is insane, Anna muttered. Her grip tightened on the rifle. Then, slowly, she lowered the barrel until it pointed harmlessly at the floor. Every sensible part of her screamed that this was how people ended up as headlines. Yet her feet moved anyway, carrying her toward the door, each step measured on the groaning boards. The cold bled through the wood, a ghost of the storm beyond. Her gloved fingers found the latch. The metal bit through leather, sharp and unforgiving. For a moment she just stood there, forehead almost touching the doorframe, listening. On the other side, the silver wolf panted, quick and shallow. Claws clicked once on the planks as it shifted its weight. "Just breathe and be," she whispered, hearing her grandfather's calm settle over the trembling in her chest. "In, out. That's all." She flicked the lock. The click sounded huge in the little cabin, louder than the crack of the fire. Inch by inch, she pulled the door open. The storm punched in, a fist of needles and ice. Wind clawed under her hood, turned her cheeks instantly numb. Snow blasted across the threshold. The silver wolf froze, head whipping toward her, amber eyes blazing in the swirl of white. Power rolled off its massive body like heat from the stove. For a single suspended heartbeat, human and predator stared at each other across the threshold, the line between safety and the wild no thicker than a piece of wood. Anna swallowed. The only thing between her and the animal was trust, and trust had nearly gotten her killed once already. She stepped back, opening the door wider. "If you want shelter," she rasped over the wind, "come in." Rifle half raised but pointed low, Anna stepped out onto the porch. The cold hit harder out here, a solid wall that stole the warmth from her lungs. Snowflakes spun sideways in the wind. Her boots creaked on the frozen planks. Both wolves went perfectly still, watching her. Up close, the trap on the smaller wolf's leg was even worse. Jagged iron teeth had nearly closed around bone. Blood had saturated the fur and frozen there, a dark crust around angry, swollen flesh. Each shallow breath came with a broken little sound. Revulsion surged through her, not at the wolves, but at the kind of human who set a device like this and walked away. "Don't move," she said softly, as if she were talking to a wounded stranger and not apex predators. "I'm going to help." The silver wolf's ears tipped forward. Its head cocked a fraction, like it was listening, thinking. That look, sharp, assessing, uncomfortably aware, sent a different kind of chill down her spine. Wolves didn't listen to people. They didn't drag their injured to the front doors. They didn't stare at you like they were weighing the contents of your soul. With a breath that steamed in the air, Anna leaned the rifle against the wall beside the door. Still within easy reach. No longer in her hands. It felt like stepping out of armor. She edged back into the cabin just long enough to grab what she needed, the dented first aid tin from over the sink, a stack of wool blankets from the cedar chest, the leftover venison stew she'd planned to stretch through tomorrow. When she returned, the wolves hadn't moved more than an inch. "I'm making you a windbreak," she told them, the words spilling out as white puffs. "Then we deal with that trap." She spread blankets in the corner of the covered porch, between the firewood stack and the wall, building a crude nest where the wind couldn't reach so easily. The silver wolf watched every motion, muscles taut but not advancing, not retreating. She set the warm bowl of stew just inside the sheltered space and backed away. The silver wolf's gaze flicked from the food, to her, down to the injured wolf. "Help your friend first," Anna said, gesturing toward the blankets. "The food'll still be there." For a moment, time seemed to freeze along with everything else. Then the silver wolf moved, careful, deliberate. It nudged its companion's shoulder, then braced itself and pushed, encouraging the smaller animal to stagger upright. Each limping step left a fresh smear of red on the boards, but together they made it to the nest of blankets. The wounded wolf eased down with a shuddering sigh. The silver wolf turned back and planted itself between Anna and the injured one. Guarding, not challenging. Anna's breath hitched. This wasn't just instinct. This was a choice. The wind rose again, screaming under the eaves. Ice rode the air, her fingertips ached through her gloves. The injured wolf was already shivering, its body losing the battle to conserve heat. "You're going to freeze out here," she murmured, crouching beside the mangled leg. The metal was so cold it burned when she brushed it. "And I can't fix this on the porch." Every safety lecture she'd ever heard lined up and shouted in her head: do not trap yourself with wild animals. Do not forget they are dangerous. Do not bring them into your home. But the fact remained, they had come to her. To the woman who'd run to the end of the world because the world hadn't opened a single door for her when she needed it most. Anna looked from the ruined leg to the silver wolf's unblinking gaze. "I'm going to open the door," she said quietly. "If you follow me inside, we all have to trust each other not to regret it. That's the deal." The wolf didn't nod. But its eyes flicked once to the warm rectangle of light, then back to her. Waiting. Anna rose, legs trembling from more than cold now. She backed toward the cabin and swung the door wide, letting firelight spill out across the snow-swept boards. "Come on," she whispered, voice raw. "Before I change my mind." As the storm howled and the darkness crowded close, she understood she was crossing a line she could never uncross, not just with these wolves, but with the part of herself that had sworn never again to open any door for anyone. She just didn't know yet that the decision had roots reaching all the way back to a different night, in a different kind of storm, when she'd learned exactly what happened when help never came. And that night, the one that drove her into these mountains, was the reason she couldn't walk away now. Snow whirled across the porch like it was trying to erase everything on it: wolves, woman, doubts. For a heartbeat nothing moved. The injured wolf shivered in its nest of blankets, head lolling. Its breath came out in ragged wisps that vanished almost as soon as they left its muzzle. The silver wolf stood over it, muscles tight, eyes ticking between Anna and the open door. "Come on," she urged again, because the cold was starting to bite through her boots and because if she gave herself another 10 seconds to think, she'd slam the door and pretend none of this had happened. The silver wolf shifted first. It stepped forward, snow crust cracking off its fur, and nosed at its companion's shoulder. The smaller wolf tried to rise, legs wobbling. A soft, broken sound escaped it when the trapped paw touched the boards. "Easy," Anna murmured, as if they understood tone if not words. Together, the wolves staggered toward the threshold, the silver one half bracing, half carrying the other. Each step smeared thin arcs of blood across the porch. Anna's stomach clenched, but she held the door and kept herself from backing away. The silver wolf reached the split between outside and in and hesitated. Warmth spilled past Anna's legs in a slow, golden tide. From here, she could feel the animal's body heat, smell wet fur and iron. Its eyes met hers again. She didn't bare her teeth. Didn't raise the rifle. She just stood there, heart pounding hard enough to shake her ribs, offering the one thing she had left to give, space that was hers. The silver wolf stepped inside. It crossed the threshold with the wary, deliberate care of someone entering an enemy's home, gaze flicking over the room, the fire, the furniture, the corners where shadows clung. Then it turned its head and whuffed softly at the injured wolf. That one stumbled, nearly fell, then lurched through after its guardian. Its back paw dragged uselessly, trap clinking once against the wood. Anna pushed the door shut behind them. The click of the latch sounded too final. For a moment, the three of them just breathed. The wind battered the walls, furious at being cut off. The fire hissed as snow melted from their coats and dripped onto the hearthstones. I just locked myself in a wooden box with 2 apex predators, Anna thought faintly. Granddad would be so proud. Or he'd come back from the grave to yell at me. Okay, she said aloud, mostly to hear something human. Her voice came out hoarse. We're doing this. Great. The smaller wolf collapsed near the doorway, chest heaving. The trap dug deeper as it folded, and the sound it made, half whine, half attempted growl, made her teeth ache. The silver wolf wheeled, placing itself between Anna and the injured animal again, head low, ears forward. I'm not going to hurt either of you, she said. That's sort of the opposite of the plan. It didn't relax, exactly. But it didn't leap for her throat either, which counted as a win. Anna edged sideways toward the table, keeping her movements slow, obvious. She set the rifle on top where she could grab it if everything went to hell in the next 10 seconds, then knelt by the battered first aid tin. Her fingers weren't steady as she snapped the lid open. Gauze, scissors, tape, a bottle of antiseptic, old but still usable. Granddad had packed it for hunting mishaps, twisted ankles, accidental cuts, maybe the occasional careless knife slip. Not this. She carried the kit back toward the wolves. They followed her approach with identical, unblinking intensity. When she was close enough to smell their breath, meat and winter and pain, she stopped. I have to get that thing off, she told them. Otherwise your friend is going to lose the leg. Or more. The silver wolf's head swung toward the mangled paw. It stared at the metal, then shifted aside a half step, enough to give her room while still hovering close enough to intervene if she did something they didn't like. The trust in that small movement almost hurt more than the sight of the wound. Okay, she whispered. Okay, we'll be quick. Up close, the trap looked even worse. The iron teeth had cut through fur and skin into muscle. Swelling had turned the joint into an ugly, purple mass. She could see where the metal had chewed a groove nearly to the bone. Anna swallowed hard against the bile rising in her throat. I'm sorry, she said softly to the injured wolf. Its eyes slid to hers, glazed but aware. This is going to hurt like hell. She dug in the kit for the wire cutters she'd packed more out of habit than expectation. Her hands shook as she fit the blades around one of the trap springs. The silver wolf's head lowered until its muzzle hovered inches from her shoulder. She could feel its breath fan warm against her neck, a phantom of summer in the chill of the cabin. Just breathe and be, she told herself again, tightening her grip. In, out, cut. She squeezed. The spring gave way with a metallic snap that sounded far too loud. The trap's jaws sprang open. The injured wolf jerked, a strangled yelp ripping from its throat. For a terrifying instant, Anna thought it would twist and bite in reflex, but it stayed where it was, muscles shuddering, sides heaving. Good, good, she murmured. It's off. It's off. She tossed the hateful piece of metal across the floor. It skidded and clanged against the stone hearth before settling, jaws hanging open like a mockery. Blood welled freely now that the pressure was gone, spilling hot and slick across her gloves. She pressed gauze around the worst of it, doing what she could to staunch the flow. The wolf whimpered, then slowly relaxed again, head dropping back onto its paws. The silver wolf watched every movement, a low rumble vibrating in its chest, not quite a growl, not quite a purr. A warning, or a comfort, or both. Anna taped the bandage as securely as she could. The job was sloppy, fur got in the way and her fingers were clumsy with adrenaline. But when she eased back, the bleeding had slowed to a sluggish ooze. "That's all I can do for now," she said finally, sitting back on her heels. Her knees protested. "Rest. Please." She pushed herself upright and edged toward the kitchen, legs buzzing. The wolves followed her with their eyes, but neither tried to stand. The smaller one's lids had already drooped. Exhaustion was dragging it under whether it wanted to sleep or not. The pot of stew she'd warmed earlier sat on the stove, still faintly warm. She ladled the rest into a wide wooden bowl and carried it back, the rich scent of venison and herbs filling the little cabin. 3 sets of noses flared. Anna suppressed the hysterical urge to laugh. "Yeah, I know. Not exactly gourmet, but you're not in a position to be picky." She set the bowl down a cautious distance from the injured wolf's head and stepped back, palms empty and open. The silver wolf sniffed the steam, then glanced at her, as if waiting for permission. "You've earned it," she said. "Go on." It leaned down, nudged the bowl closer to the wounded wolf, and waited until the smaller one had taken a few shaky bites before eating any itself. Something in Anna's chest twinged. The scene should have been absurd, a woman in a red hood standing in a log cabin, serving stew to wolves like they were unexpected dinner guests. Instead it felt, weirdly right. As if this was the kind of night the mountains had always been saving for her. "You," she said, pointing gently at the injured wolf once they'd eaten enough to slow their frantic gulping. "You're Frost. Because if you were any paler, I'd lose you in the snow." Frost's ears twitched at the sound, though that could have been coincidence. "And you?" She let her gaze linger on the larger wolf. Close up, his coat wasn't just gray, it was silver threaded with white, tipped in darker guard hairs that glinted when he moved. "You're Silver. It's not original, but it fits." Silver's gaze locked on her face. For a second she had the unsettling impression that he understood exactly what she'd done. She'd named them, which meant on some level she'd accepted they might not be leaving. "Don't get ideas," she muttered, looking away. "I still know this is insane." The fire burned lower, trading wild flames for deep orange coals. The cabin warmed steadily as snow melted from their fur, soaking into floorboards and Anna's socks. She peeled off her gloves and tossed them near the hearth to dry, flexing stiff fingers. "Water," she said, mostly to keep her thoughts from spiraling. "You need water. I should have thought of that sooner." She filled a metal basin at the sink and brought it over. Silver waited until Frost had drunk first, then lapped a few careful mouthfuls himself, never taking his eyes completely off Anna. "Yeah, I get it," she said. "You don't trust me. That makes 2 of us." Eventually, the injured wolf, Frost, let out a huge sigh and slid fully onto its side, breath evening into the heavy rhythm of sleep. The bandaged leg twitched occasionally, but no longer with the sharp, painful jerks from before. Silver circled once, then lay down between Frost and the door, a living barrier. From where Anna stood, he was a wall of fur and muscle blocking the exit entirely. She realized 2 things at once. 1, her escape route now involved either climbing out a window in a blizzard or convincing that wall of muscle to move. 2, weirdly, that didn't make her as panicked as it should have. "You can guard the door all you want," she told him, fighting a yawn. "Just don't chew on the furniture." He blinked slowly. It was the closest thing to a promise she was going to get. Exhaustion crashed down the moment the adrenaline began to ebb. Her limbs felt thick, her head buzzing faintly. It had been a long day even before the wolves had arrived, hauling wood, checking storm alerts, arguing with her parents over a patchy phone call about why going back to the city was not on the menu, thanks. She dragged Granddad's old armchair a little closer to the fire, the wooden legs scraping softly across the floor. Silver's ears flicked at the sound, but he didn't rise. "I'm going to sit right here," she informed him. "Where I can see both of you and the door. Don't take it personally." She sank into the chair and tugged a blanket over her legs. Her muscles sighed in relief. The fire's warmth washed over her, loosening something tight in her chest she hadn't even realized she'd been holding since the moment she heard that first scratch at the door. From this angle, she had a clear line of sight. Frost, curled near the wall, breathing slow and deep. Silver, sprawled between them and the exit, head resting on crossed paws, amber eyes half-lidded but never fully closing. Snow still clung in little spikes to the fur along his spine. Steam rose faintly from his coat as the heat of the room battled the cold embedded in him. "You stay on your side, I stay on mine," she murmured, voice slurring around the edges. "We survive the night, we renegotiate in the morning. Deal?" Silver's tail thumped once against the floor. Just once. It felt dangerously like an answer. Anna told herself she'd only rest her eyes for a moment. Just long enough to let her hands stop shaking. She'd spent too many nights sleepless not to recognize the glassy, brittle feeling in her bones. If she didn't give in a little, she'd crack. The firelight blurred. Shadows softened. The storm outside faded to a distant, droning roar. The last thing she saw before sleep dragged her under was the steady glow of amber eyes watching her from the doorway, guarding her from the winter, or watching to make sure she didn't become a threat. Maybe both. She slept. Outside, the blizzard raged and screamed against the mountains. Inside the cabin, a woman and two wolves lay within the same thin ring of firelight, sharing the same air, the same fragile warmth. By morning, Anna would discover that the rules she thought governed the world, about wounds, and predators, and what counted as possible, were already breaking. But for now, she dreamed of cold metal and closing doors, and of hands that hadn't reached back for her. And somewhere in the dark, something old and bound stirred, sensing that, for the first time in a very long time, the story was about to change. Anna dreamed of metal teeth and closing doors. In the dream, she wasn't in a cabin but on a train again, trapped in a press of bodies, the air thick with perfume and old sweat. The doors at either end of the car stayed stubbornly shut no matter how hard she shoved them, no matter how raw her palms became. When she looked down, the floor was snow, and something dark was bleeding into it, spreading out from beneath her boots. A howl rose somewhere beyond the glass. She jerked awake. For a panicked second she didn't know where she was. The world was a blur of shadow and cold, the fire a low, sullen glow in the hearth. Her neck ached from the angle she'd slept in, one arm had gone completely numb beneath her. The storm had quieted. Instead of a continuous roar there was only the occasional sigh of wind sliding past the logs. Anna blinked gritty eyes and pushed the blanket down. Her breath puffed white in the dim air. The fire had burned nearly to ash, a thin skin of embers pulsing red under gray. The cabin was empty. Her heart lurched. The wolves. Had she imagined them? Some long, elaborate hallucination spun out of isolation and old fear? She'd brought them inside, hadn't she? Cut the trap off, fed them stew, given them names. Frost. Silver. Too much, she muttered. You finally cracked. She shifted upright, and froze. Two pairs of amber eyes were watching her from the other side of the room. Anna's pulse collided painfully with her ribs. It took her brain a second to catch up, to recognize shapes and rearrange them into something that made sense. Silver lay on the floorboards near the door, paws crossed neatly, head lifted. Frost sprawled closer to the hearth, exactly where she'd left him. Only, not exactly. Holy. Anna shoved the blanket aside and stumbled to her feet. Pins and needles stabbed through her legs, almost dropping her. She gripped the back of the armchair until the room steadied, then limped toward the wolves. Frost watched her approach, eyes clear. Alert. Not the glassy, pain-glazed stare from the night before. He shifted, gathering limb under him, and rose. He put full weight on the injured leg. There was no flinch. No hitch. No tremor of pain. His paw came down with clean, solid confidence. He walked a tight half-circle and sat, tail thumping once against the floor, an almost pleased little huff escaping him. Anna stared at his leg. The bandage she'd wrapped with shaking hands was gone, shredded into limp strips scattered across the boards like shed snakeskin. Beneath it, the leg looked normal. Not swollen. Not mangled. Thick white fur lay smoothly over skin that should have been purple and torn. She dropped to a crouch before she could stop herself. Easy, she breathed, more to her own sanity than to Frost. He didn't pull away when she reached out. Her fingers sank into dense fur, warm from the banked fire. She parted it, hunting for what she knew had to be there, angry red slashes, stitched by clumsy tape, bruising, something. There was nothing. No scar. No scab. Not even a patch of missing hair. The memory of the trap was bright and jagged, metal teeth buried to the bone, blood spilling hot over her gloves, the stink of torn flesh. The kind of wound that should have meant months of limping, if the wolf survived at all. Impossible, she whispered. The word came out as vapor and disbelief. Her rational mind hit a wall and rebounded, trying to find footholds where there weren't any. She looked up. Silver was watching her, head tilted slightly, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. What are you? Anna asked before she could swallow the question. He didn't answer, of course. He only held her gaze, something like relief flickering at the edges of his expression. If wolves could look satisfied, he did. Frost nosed her shoulder once, almost affectionately, then padded away from her toward the window. He moved like a healthy animal, weight evenly distributed, tail flicking lazily. No limp. No favoring the leg. There was no version of reality she understood where this was normal. Okay, Anna said faintly. Okay. So the universe is playing with the rules a little. Fine. She pushed herself upright on wobbling legs and went to coax the fire back to life. As she fed the embers fresh kindling, the edges of panic dulled enough for other sensations to seep in, the stiff ache in her spine from sleeping in the chair, the dryness in her mouth, the sharp, animal tang of wet fur saturating the cabin. It smelled like a den. The snow didn't let up for 3 days. It shifted from blizzard to relentless fall, big flakes drifting down from a sky the color of unpolished steel. The world outside the windows was nothing but white and the dark suggestions of trees. Her truck had disappeared completely under a soft, lethal curve. Inside, they settled into something that looked disturbingly like a routine. Anna cooked. She'd never thought she'd be sharing venison stew with wolves, but there she was every evening, ladling a generous portion into their wide wooden bowl before serving herself. Frost ate like he had a vendetta against hunger, head buried, ears pinned in bliss. Silver waited until his companion had taken the edge off before leaning down. He always looked at Anna first, as if to check that she hadn't changed her mind about this truce. "You know this is a terrible idea," she told them on the second night, leaning against the counter with her own bowl. "You're supposed to stay wild. Mysterious. Terrifying. Not house guests." Frost lifted his head, broth dripping from his chin, and sneezed. Silver's ears twitched. He held her gaze long enough that something in her chest went loose and hot. Then he dropped his muzzle to the bowl. "Right," she said. "Noted. No opinions from the wolves." When she worked, they watched. Her grandfather's camera felt unfamiliar in her hands after weeks of neglect, but muscle memory came back quicker than she expected. She documented the way the light hit the icicles outside, the strange sculpted shapes the wind carved into the drifts, the sharp lines of Silver's profile when he lay with his head on his paws and eyes half closed. He tolerated the clicks and whirs with stoic patience. Frost, by contrast, perked up every time, trotting closer to sniff the lens until his breath fogged the glass. "Don't smudge that," she scolded gently. "This thing is worth more than my truck." On the second day, sometime between refilling their water and checking the batteries in her flash, the story of the train tore out of her throat. It wasn't planned. There was no build-up, no careful preface. She was sitting on the rug near the hearth, hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater, watching the snow come down through the tiny square of window. Silver lay close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body radiating against her leg. Frost snored softly near the door, paws twitching in dream. It was crowded, she heard herself say. Too many people for a Tuesday afternoon. Commuter crush, you know. Silence answered her. The only sounds were the crack of sap in the fire and the faint, steady rhythm of wolf breath. Anna stared at her hands. "I tried to move away when they boxed me in. Couldn't. The door was right there, but the people near it pretended they didn't see. That was the worst part, you know. Not the hands, or the words. It was all the eyes that slid away." Her voice didn't shake as much as she thought it would. Maybe she'd told the story too many times to people who wrote things down and nodded in practiced sympathy. The detective later asked why I didn't scream. She let out a humorless laugh. As if anyone would have done anything if I had. They had places to be. Lives. No one wants to be the person who steps in and gets messy, right? Silver shifted. His big head lifted from his paws. His ears angled toward her, sharp and intent. "I hit the alarm button," Anna went on, because now that she'd started, stopping felt like choking. No one looked at me. Not even the woman standing right next to me. And when the train pulled into the station, they were just gone. The men vanished into the crowd like nothing ever happened. She drew her knees up and wrapped her arms around them. The firelight blurred briefly. I kept thinking about doors after that. How easy it is to look at one and decide whatever's on the other side is not your problem. She turned her head. Silver was closer than she'd realized. At some point he'd crept nearer, inch by inch, until his side almost touched her shins. He studied her face with a concentration that would have been unnerving on a person. On a wolf, it was something else entirely. His ears flicked with each rise and fall of her voice, as if catching every word. "You're not people," she told him. "But you came to my door anyway." The admission sat between them, oddly heavy. Her hand moved before she made the choice. Fingers stretching, hovering over the thick fur between his ears. This was a line, maybe as dangerous in its own way as the one she'd crossed opening the cabin door. "Can I?" He didn't flinch. Didn't bare his teeth. He simply stayed very, very still. Anna let her hands settle on his head. His fur was softer than she'd expected, dense under her palm, warmth seeping into her skin. His eyes slid half-closed, not in sleep but in something like surrender. She threaded her fingers gently through the coat at his neck, feeling the thick ridge of muscle beneath. The simple, solid contact short-circuited something in her. She hadn't touched anyone without flinching in months. She hadn't trusted anything bigger than herself not to break her open. "Okay," she whispered. "We're really doing this." Silver let out a long, slow exhale. It smelled of meat and snow and something older she couldn't name. It felt like an answer. On the morning of the fourth day, the sky cleared as if someone had flipped a switch. Anna woke to a strange brightness pressing against her eyelids. When she opened them, pale light filled the cabin. The silence outside had changed. Instead of the muffled hush of falling snow, there was a crisp stillness, like a held breath. She stretched, joints popping, and pushed herself upright. Frost lay upside down near the fire, all four paws in the air. Silver was already on his feet, standing at the door, tail held level, ears pricked toward the window. "Is it over?" Anna croaked. He glanced back, then stepped aside, leaving the path clear. She took that as a yes. The moment she cracked the door open, white flooded her vision. Sunlight bounced off the snow with brutal enthusiasm, forcing her to squint. The air was so cold it felt clean, like inhaling shards of glass. The valley had been remade. Where there had been a howling wall of gray, now there was a sky so blue it hurt, washed clean of every cloud. The mountains burned with fresh white, sharp and bright against the horizon. Drifts piled up against the cabin, halfway to the window. Trees stood cloaked and sculpted, branches bowed under the weight. Anna laughed, a startled sound that fogged the air. "It's beautiful," she said to no one and to the wolves behind her both. She tugged her red hood up, cinched her coat tighter, and stepped out onto the newly carved steps. Snow packed under her boots with that specific quiet crunch that only came with deep cold. Her breath rose in brief clouds. Silver flowed past her, a silver streak against the white, Frost bounding after him in a spray of powder. They paused at the edge of the clearing, turning back as if to check she was still coming. For a moment, standing there with the cabin at her back and the whole glittering valley spread before her, Anna had the strangest sense of déjà vu, like she'd stepped into a photograph she hadn't taken yet. Red cloak. Wild hair blown by the cold. Two wolves flanking her, one lean and pale, the other massive and watchful. She laughed again, softer this time. "Fine," she told the mountains. "You win. It's a fairy tale." They trailed her as she broke trail through the yard. Frost hurled himself into drifts head first, surfacing with a snort, snow caked over his muzzle. Silver moved more sedately, pacing at her side like a bodyguard, gaze constantly sweeping the tree line. For a few hours, time loosened its grip. She forgot the train. Forgot the city. Forgot everything but the bite of the air on her cheeks and the way the wolf's fur gleamed against the snow. It couldn't last. She knew that even before she found herself standing at the edge of the clearing, staring into the dark tangle of pines. "You can't stay," she said. Both wolves looked at her. Frost tilted his head, ears pricked. Silver stood very still. "You're not dogs," Anna went on, pushing through the tightness in her throat. "You've got a whole world out there. A pack. Or, whatever wolves have." The idea of them leaving carved a small, neat hole in her chest. "I'm grateful," she added, because she owed them that much. "For the company. For not tearing me apart in my sleep. But if you stay here, you'll get too used to humans. To me. And the next person you meet might not," she swallowed, "might not be me." Frost flicked a glance at Silver, then toward the forest. "Go home," Anna whispered. "Before I get selfish." She took a step back toward the cabin. Then another. If she turned around and went inside, if she shut the door, maybe it would be easier. Snow crunched. She looked up. Frost had already started toward the trees, moving with that joyous, springy gait he had when he forgot he'd ever been injured. At the edge of the clearing, he paused and looked back, tongue lolling, tail wagging once. "Bye, Frost," she called, voice catching. He yipped, actually yipped, and vanished into the shadows. Silver didn't move. He stood in the center of the clearing, gaze locked on her. The wind ruffled the fur along his neck. The sun picked out lines of silver and white in his coat, haloing him in light. "Don't make this harder," Anna said, trying for stern and landing somewhere around pleading. "You know I'm right." He took one step toward her. Her heart leapt. Then he stopped, as if hitting an invisible barrier, and looked past her shoulder at the cabin. At the open door. At the life she'd carved out inside those four walls. She read the debate in the set of his shoulders, the slow shift of his weight. "I'll be okay," she lied gently. "I came up here to be alone, remember? This is what I chose." Silver huffed, breath steaming in the cold. For a moment, she thought he'd ignore her, that he'd close the distance and sit on her damn porch until she caved. Instead, he dipped his head once. It was so subtle she might have imagined it. A small, grave acknowledgement. Then he turned and trotted toward the tree line, every movement smooth and sure. At the edge of the shadow, he stopped and looked back one last time. Anna lifted a hand. He vanished into the pines. The silence that followed was a different kind of quiet than the one before the storm. Thicker. Lonelier. She stood there until the cold penetrated through her boots and up her calves, until her fingers went stiff inside her gloves. Only then did she go back into the cabin and close the door on the sparkling, empty clearing. The days after felt longer. She moved through them on muscle memory, hauling wood, checking the traps she'd set for rabbits, shooting the way the light hit the snow. The cabin, which had once felt like a refuge, now seemed too big for one person. Too quiet. She caught herself pausing at the door before bed, listening for the soft click of claws on the porch. Twice she woke in the middle of the night sure she'd heard a whine outside, only to find nothing but the wind. "Get a grip," she told her reflection one morning, splashing water on her face. "They're wild animals. They're not coming back just because you're pathetic." That afternoon, something moved at the edge of her vision. Anna froze at the sink, heart leaping into her throat. Carefully, she turned her head toward the window. A silver shape stood at the tree line, half-shadowed. Silver. He watched the cabin, posture relaxed but alert. When her gaze met his, even through the glass, a strange warmth bloomed in her chest, part relief, part something she didn't want to name yet. "You came back," she whispered to the empty room. He didn't approach the porch that day, only lingered a while before melting back into the forest. 2 days later he reappeared, closer. This time there was something on the porch when she opened the door, a perfect, spiral pine cone placed neatly on the top step. Anna picked it up, turned it over in her hand, and laughed. "You brought me a present," she said, ridiculous happiness fizzing in her veins. "That's not normal behavior, you know that, right?" He sat in the snow, tail curled around his paws, watching her. After that, it became a pattern. Every few days, a glimpse of silver fur between the trees, a new offering on the porch. A shed antler polished smooth where he'd carried it. A chunk of quartz that glittered faintly in the light. Once, an old rusted bottle cap that made her shake her head and smile before tossing it in the trash. She started taking pictures again, real ones. She captured him at the tree lean, half in shadow. She caught him mid-leap across a drift, jaws open in a silent snarl of joy. Through the long lens, she saw details she'd missed with the naked eye, the faint scar along his muzzle, the way his ears tipped at certain sounds, the intelligence in his eyes. Her hand steadied on the camera more each day. The part of her brain that framed shots and chased light slowly drowned out the part that replayed worst moments on a loop. It was almost enough to make her forget the outside world still existed. Almost. The call from her parents came on a day when the sky was a washed-out gray and Silver had been gone longer than usual. Her phone buzzed on the table, the unfamiliar ringtone startling in the quiet. Anna stared at the screen for a second before answering. "Hey," she said. "Annie." Her mother's voice was too bright, too careful. "How are you, sweetheart?" "We've been worried. The weather reports." "I'm fine," Anna cut in. "Storm's over. Roads are a mess, but the cabin held." Her father's voice joined the line on speaker. "We saw on the news they were calling it a once-in-a-decade blizzard. You picked quite the winter to go feral, kiddo." She smiled despite herself. Always did have good timing. They talked around the thing they really wanted to ask at first, her mother asking about the woodpile, her father reminding her to keep the truck battery from dying. The normality of it felt fragile, like glass. Then her mother cleared her throat. The gallery called again. Anna's stomach tightened. "Oh. They still want your work," her father said. "The show we talked about? They haven't filled your slot yet. They said whenever you're ready, they'll make room." "Dad. You can't hide up there forever, Annie." His voice gentled, but the words still landed like blows. "You're too talented to let what happened take everything from you." The train car closed in around her in memory, the crush, the smell, the way everyone had stared at the floor. The detective's shrug. The stack of forms. "I'm not hiding," she said softly. "I just don't trust people very much right now." "You won't heal by yourself," her mother put in. "You need therapy. Real therapy, with professionals, not just a pause." Trees. Anna walked to the window without thinking, phone clutched to her ear. The clearing lay quiet under a fresh dusting of snow. Silver sat at the edge of the trees. He must have arrived while they were talking. There were no tracks leading up to where he perched, paws sunk into the white, tail curled around his feet. He stared at the cabin, head slightly cocked, as if he could hear every word. Maybe he could. "I'm not entirely alone," Anna said. Her father seized on the wrong part. "There are neighbors, then? Have you talked to anyone else up there? A ranger, or—" "Not people," she interrupted. "Never mind. It's not important." "Anna." Her mother's voice had that brittle undertone that always meant tears were close. "Please. Just come home. We'll go to the police again, we'll find a better lawyer, we'll—" "There's nothing to find," Anna said, staring into Silver's amber eyes. "The cameras were broken, remember? The footage was corrupted. The men disappeared. The detective lost my file under a stack of more important cases." That old mix of rage and helplessness rose again, sharp in her throat. Silver's ears twitched, his gaze sharpening, as if he recognized the shift in her voice. "No one stopped them," Anna went on quietly. "No one even looked. So, no, Mom. I'm not ready to get back on trains and stand in galleries making small talk with strangers who would probably also look away if it happened right in front of them." There was a long silence on the line. "We love you," her father said at last. "That's all. We don't know how to help if you won't let us." "I know," she whispered. "I'm trying. I'll call again soon, okay?" She hung up before they could press further and leaned her forehead against the cool glass. Silver remained where he was, watching. "See," she said to him, voice too thick. "You wanted to know why I'm up here. That's why." He didn't blink for a long time. Then he rose, shook snow from his coat, and vanished back into the trees. The morning the bear found her, the sun had just started to edge over the mountains. Anna woke restless, the phone call still echoing in her skull. The air inside the cabin felt stale. She needed to move. To do something that reminded her she was more than the worst thing that had happened to her. The light looked promising, soft, pink gold fingers sneaking over the jagged peaks. Perfect for catching steam rising off fur, frost on whiskers, the delicate breath clouds of animals who didn't know or care about human mess. She checked her camera batteries, shrugged into her coat and red hood, and laced up her boots. Her ankle twinged from an old sprain as she tightened the brace, a reminder that the mountains made different kinds of demands than the city. She hesitated only a second at the door. "Don't be stupid," she told her reflection in the window. "Stay aware. Don't push too far." Then she stepped into the hush of dawn. The snow had crusted overnight, making travel easier. Each step still sank, but not as deeply. Her breath came out in steady plumes. The forest loomed ahead, trees etched black against the pale sky. She could have sworn she felt eyes on her back. Not threatening. Just there. "Shadow me if you want," she called softly over her shoulder. "But don't judge my cardio." If Silver was out there, he didn't answer. She moved carefully between the trees, scanning for tracks. The world was a study in contrasts, dark trunks, white drifts, the occasional flash of bird wings. She found rabbit prints, the delicate punctures of a fox, the wide, splayed impressions of a moose. "Bingo," she murmured. Following them, she crept until she saw movement through the branches, a broad, hulking shape, antlers like stripped trees, steam curling from its nostrils. The moose stood in a small clearing, rimed with frost, its coat lit with the first clean rays of the sun. Anna eased the camera up, heart thudding with a different kind of adrenaline. Focus. Frame. Light. The familiar rhythm soothed her. She exhaled, ready to click. The moose's ears snapped forward. In the space of a heartbeat it went from stillness to full flight, bolting out of the frame and vanishing into the trees with surprising grace for something so huge. What the? A new sound rolled across the clearing. A guttural, chest-deep rumble that shook her bones. Anna turned her head slowly. A brown bear unfolded from behind a fallen log, massive shoulders shrugging aside snow. Its fur was thick and matted, its eyes small and dark. At its hind leg, a smaller shape tumbled, fuzzy and awkward and painfully cute. A cub. Fantastic, Anna breathed. Just perfect. She'd read the pamphlets. She'd listened to the rangers talk the day she'd gotten her cabin keys. Don't get between a mother and her cub. Don't run. Make yourself big. Speak calmly. Her mouth went dry. Hey there, she said, voice higher than she'd like. I'm just leaving, okay? No threat. No interest in your kid. We're good. She lifted her arms slightly, trying to look large but not aggressive. The camera strap dug into her neck. The bear huffed, steam fanning from its muzzle. Its gaze flicked from her to the spot the moose had just vacated, then back. It chose her. The first step it took toward her felt like the earth shifting. Okay, Anna said again, backing away. We're not doing this. I'm leaving. See? Leaving. She walked as quickly as she dared, keeping her eyes on the bear, her boots careful on the uneven snow. Her mind rattled through instructions. Don't trip. Don't run. Don't turn your back. The bear closed the distance faster than she expected. Its walk became a lope, snow kicking up around its legs. Anna's composure cracked. She turned and ran. The forest blurred. Branches whipped at her face. The camera bounced against her chest. Somewhere behind her, something crashed through the underbrush with terrible force. She made it 10 yards before her boot caught on a hidden branch under the snow. Pain lanced up her leg as she went down hard, her ankle twisting violently. The world tilted. Snow exploded around her. Her camera flew from numb fingers and vanished into a drift. For a second she couldn't breathe. All the air had been punched from her lungs. When it came back, it came with bright, sharp awareness of several things. Her ankle screamed when she tried to move it. The bear's snarls were much closer. No one was here to look away this time. There was simply no one. Anna clawed at the snow, dragging herself forward with her hands. Each pull moved her inches. The cold soaked into her jeans, up through her gloves. Panic narrowed her world to white and breath and pain. The bear's shadow fell over her. She rolled onto her back, panting. The animal towered above her now, close enough that she could see the wet shine of its nose, the length of its claws, the small scar above its left eye. Its cub peered from behind a tree, making small, curious chuffing sounds. Please, Anna whispered, because she had nothing else left, no tricks, no doors to slam, no crowd to appeal to. Just her and the wild. Please. The bear reared up, front paws lifting. Something silver slammed into its shoulder, a blur of motion and teeth. The bear roared, staggering sideways. A wolf hung from its fur, jaws clamped high on the thick muscle where neck met back. Silver. He let go as the bear twisted, landing lightly in the snow, lips peeled back in a snarl unlike anything she'd heard from him before. Silver, she gasped. He didn't glance at her. His entire world had narrowed to the threat. He darted in, snapping at the bear's legs, then out again before its claws could rake him. He was a streak of motion, all focus and fury, far more feral than the watchful creature who sat in her clearing leaving gifts. The bear swiped, missing by inches. Silver circled, herding it away from Anna, putting himself between them again and again. She tried to crawl backward, but every attempt to move her injured ankle made her vision gray out. Useless. She could only watch, helpless, as the fight unfolded. One mistimed dodge. The bear's paw came down in a brutal arc, catching Silver across the ribs and flinging him into a tree with a sickening thud. He hit the trunk and dropped, limp, snow exploding around him. No. The word ripped from her. The bear dropped back to all fours, panting. Blood streaked its fur where Silver's teeth had found purchase. It swung its massive head toward Anna again, weighing whether this was worth further effort. A pale shape darted from the trees and clipped its hind leg. Frost. He hit and ran, drawing the bear's attention for a heartbeat. Another wolf appeared on the other side, smaller, darker, and nipped at the opposite flank. Then another. And another. 5 wolves in all, fanning out, moving with eerie coordination. They harassed, retreated, harassed again, never staying in reach long enough for the bear to pin them. Their howls and snarls wove into something like a strategy, voices rising and falling in harsh counterpoint. The bear spun, snapping, swiping, frustration bleeding into its calls. The cub bleated anxiously from the edge of the clearing. At last, with a final bellow that sounded very much like disgust, the bear backed away, putting its bulk between the wolves and its offspring. It scooped the cub with nudges and grunts and retreated into the trees, crashing through underbrush until the sound faded. The wolves did not follow. They turned instead toward Anna and the unmoving silver shape by the tree. Silver, she sobbed, dragging herself toward him. Her ankle screamed in protest. She ignored it. He lay twisted on his side, fur darkened where blood seeped through. His breaths came shallow and ragged. One of his legs stuck out at an angle that made her stomach flip. Frost reached him first, pressing his muzzle against Silver's neck, whining. The other wolves formed a rough circle around them, eyes flashing, bodies tense. "Move," Anna choked. "Please, let me." A gray wolf stepped in front of her, teeth bared, a low growl vibrating in its chest. Not for her. For the world. For anything that might still be hunting them. She didn't care. She used her hands to haul herself the last few feet until she could touch Silver's fur. It was already cooling under her palms. "No," she whispered. "You don't get to die. Not after everything. Not after, I just..." Her voice broke. She curled over him, one arm thrown across his shoulders, burying her face against his neck. The scent of him filled her lungs, blood and winter and something bright and wild. "I should have stayed home," she said, words muffled. "I should have listened to the pamphlets. I should have, just breathe and be, right? That's what Granddad said. That's what I told you. I'm sorry." I am so sorry." Around them, the wolves began to howl. It wasn't the chaotic chorus she'd heard on distant nights. This was organized, layered, a low note starting somewhere to her left, joined a heartbeat later by a higher one on her right. A rhythm emerged, a rise, a fall, a pattern that seemed to sync with her racing heart. The air changed. It thickened, humming against her skin like static before a storm. The hair on her arms lifted. The snow beneath her palms vibrated with a sound that existed more in her bones than in her ears. Silver's body grew warm. Not just the fading warmth of life, but a heat that built like a fire catching dry tinder. Light crept along his fur, faint at first, then brighter, threads of silver white tracing the line of his spine, his ribs, his outstretched legs. Anna jerked back, eyes wide. What? The glow intensified. It wasn't like the golden light of the sun on snow. It was colder, deeper, as if someone had poured moonlight directly into his veins. It spilled out from him in shimmering lines, lifting the fur as if in a wind she couldn't feel. The wolves' howls rose with it, the harmony climbing, twisting. Silver's body shifted under her gaze. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, a mirage born of adrenaline and hypothermia. But then bones moved, subtly, horribly, shoulders narrowing, chest reshaping, spine arching. His legs lengthened, the joints twisting into angles that weren't quite animal and weren't quite human. His paws stretched, claws retracting as snow-bright fingers unfurled where there had been pads and fur. For a heartbeat, she saw both realities at once, wolf and something else overlaid, like double exposure. Anna's mind, already battered by fear and pain, simply refused to process it. The edges of her vision went black, encroaching on the swirling sphere of light that now filled the clearing. The last thing she registered was Silver's eyes opening, still that impossible amber, still full of the same fierce focus, and looking directly into hers. Then the world went white. Voices came first. Muffled, echoing through cotton. Words she couldn't quite catch rolled past her, blurred together by distance and the steady beep 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 of some machine. The smell was wrong. No smoke, no pine, no wet fur. Instead, antiseptic and something metallic edged the air. Anna fought her way up through the heavy dark. The ceiling over her was unfamiliar, smooth and off-white, dotted with fluorescent panels. A monitor glowed softly to her right. A flimsy curtain half shielded her from the hallway beyond. Her ankle throbbed dully. Her head ached. Her mouth felt like it had been stuffed with dust. "Sweetheart?" She turned her head, too fast. Pain flared behind her eyes. Her mother's face swam into focus, pale and blotchy, eyes rimmed red. Her father stood behind her, one hand on the bed rail, knuckles white. "Hey," Anna croaked. Her mother made a choked sound and leaned down to hug her as best she could around the wires. Her father cleared his throat twice before speaking. "They found you by the North Trail," he said. "You had a concussion, hypothermia, a badly sprained ankle." His mouth twisted. "You're lucky to be alive." Images crashed through her, the bear rearing, Silver flying through the air, the circle of wolves, the impossible light. "Silver," she whispered, the name tearing out of her before any other question. "The wolf, what happened to?" Her parents exchanged a look. "The hiker who brought you in said there were animal tracks around," her mother said carefully. "Bear, wolf, he wasn't sure. You're very lucky he came along when he did." "Hiker?" Anna repeated, the words sluggish on her tongue. A man found you, her father clarified. Carried you to his truck, drove you to the ranger station in the storm. We don't know his name yet, he left before we arrived. The nurse said he signed in as Peter. Peter. The name meant nothing. The amber eyes in her memory meant everything. Anna sank back against the pillows, heart pounding. The machine beside her sped up in sympathetic rhythm. She should be worrying about concussions, about how she was going to get back to the cabin, about what the hospital bill would look like. All she could think, over and over, was one desperate, looping question. What happened to my wolf? The second time Anna surfaced, the world had sharper edges. Monitors beeped in calm, unconcerned time. And 4 tugged at the skin of her hand. Her throat tasted like metal and cotton. Fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Hey there, a man's voice said. Welcome back. She turned her head. A doctor in blue scrubs, badge, HSU, checked her pupils with a penlight, then her chart. Concussion, he said. Hypothermia. Nasty ankle sprain, but no breaks. You were lucky. A hiker found you and carried you to the trailhead. A hiker, she echoed. Memory hid in shards, the bear rearing, silver slamming into its shoulder, the ring of wolves, light pouring out of his body like molten moonfire, bones shifting beneath fur. Her fingers clenched in the blanket. Where is he? She croaked. The wolf. The silver one. He saved me. Her parents were suddenly there, crowding the bed. Her mother's eyes were already wet, her father's mouth was a tight line. Sweetheart, her mother said gently, they found animal tracks, bear and maybe wolves, but you were alone when they got to you. There was a pack, Anna insisted. They drove the bear off. One was hurt, bleeding, Dr. Sue laid a hand on the guardrail. Head injuries can blur things, he said in that calm, reasonable tone she hated. You were severely hypothermic. It's very common to have vivid, dreamlike experiences. Dreamlike. Like the way the detective had called the train incident, distressing, instead of what it was. Her mother and father exchanged a look over her, the one that meant they were worried but also already half decided about what was true. There it was again, that cold, familiar feeling of standing in the middle of her own life while everyone else quietly rewrote it around her. I know what I saw, Anna whispered. The monitor beeped faster. A soft knock broke the moment. The door opened. Miss Dvorak, a nurse said. There's someone here to see you. Peter. He stepped into the room and the air went strange. Tall, broad shoulders under a faded flannel. Jeans, snow-scuffed boots. Dark hair pushed back like he'd just yanked off a hat. A fresh red scar clawed across his collarbone, disappearing under the shirt. His eyes were amber. The exact warm, impossible shade she knew better than her own reflection. Her breath stalled. Anna, her mother said, radiating relieved enthusiasm. This is Peter. He's the hiker who found you. He carried you all that way. Her smile trembled. He's your hero. He flinched almost imperceptibly at the word. Just did what anyone would, he muttered, but his gaze never left Anna's face. There was a hunger in it, and relief, and something like awe, as if he was also trying to convince himself she was real. He stepped closer and held out his hand. The monitor tattled on her again, speeding up. She slid her fingers into his. His skin was fever-warm in a way that felt familiar, like stones by a dying fire. "Hey," he said quietly, for her alone. "You're safe. The bear's gone." The words should have soothed her. Instead they made her throat ache. Her lungs stuttered. Beep beep beep. His thumb brushed the back of her hand. "Just breathe and be," he murmured. The phrase hit like a slap. Her grandfather's voice, layered over her own, "Just breathe and be, Annie," and the way she'd whispered it in the cabin with wolves in her living room, in the snow with her arms around a bleeding silver body. Words she had never spoken to any human being. Her parents were still talking, offering thanks, asking where he lived, but the sound faded. There was only the warmth of his hand and those eyes and the phrase that should be impossible on his lips. "Mom." "Dad," Anna said abruptly. "Can I have a few minutes alone with Peter?" Her mother hesitated. Her father, reading her, touched her shoulder. "5 minutes," he said. "We'll be right outside." The door clicked shut behind them. Anna didn't let go of his hand. "Did you see wolves?" she asked. "A silver one. Big. And a pale one. Frost." Emotion flickered hard across his face at the name. "Yes," he said. "There was an injured wolf. Pale. And a silver one. He's fine now." "How do you know?" Her voice roughened. "You weren't there when I... You saved him," Peter said. "He wasn't going to let you die out there." It wasn't an answer. It was exactly enough. "You were him," she whispered. "In the forest. In my cabin. At my door." He didn't deny it. For a heartbeat, the human dropped away and she saw him, her wolf, staring out through a stranger's face. Voices murmured outside. He stepped back, the moment snapping. "This isn't the place," he said, low. "Too many ears. Let them get you back to your cabin. Give me one night. I'll tell you everything." "How do I know you'll come?" she asked, but she already knew. He gave her a small, crooked smile. "Because you opened your door to me twice already. I owe you at least one truth." They tried to rush her back to the city the moment discharge papers printed. "We'll get your things from the cabin," her mother said. "You can stay with us, see a therapist, call the gallery. You don't have to decide now," her father added, which was his way of saying they'd already started deciding for her. The corners of the room crept in. She felt that train car tightness again, other people's choices closing over her head. "I'm going back to the cabin," Anna said. "You can help me up there, stay a night if you want. But I'm not promising anything about the city until I've finished something here." "Finished what?" her mother asked. She couldn't quite say, finished seeing if the impossible was real. The cabin smelled like itself and not like the hospital: smoke, wool, pine. Her ankle throbbed in its brace. Her mother fussed until Anna let her make a nest of pillows on the bed. By full dark, her parents were asleep, her mother on the couch, her father in the armchair, the fire painting them gold. Anna lay awake, pulse too loud. Finally she swung her legs over the bed and grabbed her crutches. The night outside was clear and cold enough to bite. The moon poured silver across the clearing, the snow glowed with it. Her breath rose in small clouds. "Silver," she whispered into the dark. "If you're real, if what I saw was real, please. At first there was only stillness. Then shadows shifted at the tree line. A silver shape stepped out from between the pines, each movement deliberate, weight rolling silent over the snow. He walked to the center of the clearing and stopped, head lifted, eyes burning amber. Recognition cracked through her. Not surprise, exactly. More like relief so sharp it hurt. "I know you're more than a wolf," she said, voice shaking. "I don't understand any of it, but I need the truth." She opened the door wide, just as she had that first night, and stepped aside. "This time I know what I'm inviting in," she whispered. "Or at least that I don't know. Come in anyway." He crossed the distance without hesitation, climbed the steps, and slipped past her into the cabin. His paws made the faintest sound on the floorboards. Her mother snored softly in the next room. Anna led him down the hall to her bedroom, heart in her throat. He followed close enough that she could feel his heat at her back. Inside, she closed the door. Moonlight spilled across the floor. Silver stood in it, fur turned to liquid light. "Show me," she said. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then the air thickened. Light crawled over his coat, tracing his ribs, his spine, his legs. His body blurred, stretching and folding in impossible ways, shoulders narrowing, hind legs lengthening, paws unfurling into hands. Fur receded like water poured backward. Anna watched, rooted and shaking, as the wolf unmade himself and something else took his place. The glow flared, then vanished. Peter knelt on her bedroom floor, wrapped in nothing but her spare blanket and his own shock. The scar across his collarbone burned red in the moonlight. His eyes were exactly the same. "Hi," he said, a little breathless. "It's me." Her knees wanted to give. She sat on the edge of the bed instead. "What are you?" she asked. He told her. About the pack who had once shifted freely. About humans who had hunted them. About a desperate alpha seeking a magician and wishing his people invisible, for as long as he deemed necessary. About the price, his absolute belief that humans were dangerous, taken and woven into a curse that locked them in wolf form whenever humans were near. "We faded," he said quietly. "As people. We were safe, but only as half of ourselves. The spell held as long as I held on to that hatred. Then a woman moved into a cabin at the end of the world." He told her about watching her stack wood, seeing the fear in her shoulders, the way she talked to the empty air. About Kara, Frost, caught in the trap, bleeding out. "I brought her to your door," he said. "Sure you'd prove me right. That you'd shut us out. Call a ranger. Let us die out there." "You opened the door," he said softly. "You cut the trap. You shared your food. You let monsters into your home and talked to us like we were someone." Her throat burned. "I couldn't be the person who looked away again," she said. "Every time you chose compassion over fear, it cracked the spell a little." His fingers tightened on the blanket. "When the bear came and I thought I was done, you threw yourself over me. You were terrified and you stayed. In that moment I realized I didn't believe it anymore, that all humans were dangerous. You weren't. And then there was nothing left for the magic to hold on to." The memory of light and howls rolled through her. "So I broke your curse," she said, half dazed. "By being a mess with boundary issues." His laugh came out rough and fond. "By being you." Silence pooled between them. He looked suddenly young, despite the scars. I trusted you before I trusted any person again, Anna admitted. You, Silver, you were there when I couldn't sleep. You listened. You stood between me and the door. Somewhere in there I started, falling for you. The soul, not the shape. Something bright flared in his eyes. I've loved you since the night you bled in the snow over my sister with nothing but wire cutters and stubbornness, he said. I stayed away in this skin because I didn't want to drag you into hunter crosshairs. But staying away, he shook his head. It felt worse. I'm scared, she whispered. Of people. Of this. Of trusting anything. So am I, he said. Of humans with rifles. Of losing you because I was selfish enough to love you. He drew a breath, steadying. If you want out, say the word. Go back to the city, live a human life, pretend the wolves were just hypothermic dreams. I'll keep my distance. You'll never have to see me again. Her chest hurt. Or, he continued, you stay here. On your terms. With your camera. With my pack. With me. It won't be safe. But it'll be real. I won't ever look away when you're the one at the door. Anna thought of train doors that never opened, of this cabin door swinging wide for bleeding wolves. Of years of white noise in her head, and 3 days of quiet with a wolf between her and the world. She reached out and set her hand flat on his chest. His heartbeat thudded under her palm, strong and terrified and hopeful. I'm scared, she said again. But not enough to walk away. His eyes closed briefly, as if he were praying to something older than the mountains. When he opened them, they shone. Just breathe and be, he whispered. Together, this time. She leaned in and kissed him. It wasn't fireworks. It was slow and sure, a promise more than a demand. His hands settled lightly on her shoulders, holding her like something both sturdy and precious. For the first time since the train, the weight on her ribs eased. Weeks later, she stood by the cabin in her red hood, camera warm in her hands. Snow still blanketed the clearing, but the light had changed, softer at the edges. Her breath puffed white as she watched the tree line. Now, Peter called softly from the porch behind her. 2 wolves burst from the pines, Frost and another packmate, bodies lengthening and folding as they bounded through the snow toward her. Behind her, Peter leaned against the wall, all flannel and easy strength, amber eyes tracking her more than the wolves. Anna lifted the camera and clicked. The image she caught, red hood, rushing wolves, watchful man, was almost identical to the fantasy picture she'd once kept on her phone. Only this time, it was hers. Once, frozen wolves had begged her for shelter and she'd thought she was saving them from the cold. Now she knew they'd really dragged her out of a colder place, her own fear, and into a world where her heart was finally allowed to be warm. If this journey stayed with you, kindly subscribe, like, leave a comment. More stories are already on the way.